It's often a rainy day in Ketchikan, but that doesn't mean your health should be sacrificed. This is Wet Weather Wellness.
Abby Stevenson here with another episode of Wet Weather Wellness. Winter in Ketchikan can be an especially difficult time to embrace wellness. You see the rain coming down, the wind, it gets dark early, and sometimes going outside just isn't really an option, right? Well, one topic that you can do when you're indoors is to look into your financial wellness. What does that term mean? I'm referring to a state in which you can meet your current and future financial obligations. Now, I know the topic of finance can be stressful for some people, but it's especially important to have financial wellness because if you can reduce your preoccupation with money, you will have more capacity to improve your mental and physical well-being. And yes, it is possible for everyone in Ketchikan to have a sense of well-being when it comes to your money. I recently sat down with a professional to learn more about financial wellness and what that means for ourselves. Let's take a look. I am here with financial advisor Ben Edwards. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. I blew in from outside.
So this topic of financial wellness can be one that is difficult for people. They could walk around with this stress, worrying about their finances. It's not always talked about openly. I thought that it might be nice to touch base with you to talk about what are some of the foundational elements that people need to have in place in order to embrace financial wellness in their lives.
Absolutely. It is definitely a topic that people don't want to talk about, but it's probably one of the more important topics to talk about. Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, I think I read a statistic once that a lot of strain in marriages can come from having to deal with finances.
Oh, yeah.
What are some of your recommendations for ways that people can relieve that stress?
Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have an honest conversation.
Yeah.
You're going to have to lay out the facts. I recall sitting down with a client and just having a conversation about just the need to cut back because expenses were more than intake.
And sometimes you don't even know that you have that because you're not really looking and tracking, because what you don't know can't hurt you sometimes, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think when you think about it back like 20, 30 years ago, everybody was balancing their checkbook. Now a lot of things are happening with credit cards, and that's great because you have a great statement, it's tracking everything, but you're also not looking at it on a regular basis. Some transactions are taking a while to necessarily pop up, and so you may think that you have money you actually don't have.
Okay.
And so knowing where your expenses are coming, knowing what your reoccurring expenses are, that's going to be very helpful.
Absolutely. What are some resources with regards to, you and I had talked about before, the need for people to educate themselves and the need to, look into things a little bit further. What are some resources that you might be able to recommend?
Yeah, so there is a lot of financial gurus. The first thing I will tell you is that maybe associate with one that is reputable.
Okay.
And all of them are going to be helping you do different things. For example, there are people who are going to be helping you if you are in a massive amount of debt. They can give you steps to how do you get out of that.
Sure.
And so make sure you're actually taking advice that's appropriate for your situation. One of the things I talk to people about a lot is I said, you're not everybody else. So what we're going to do depends.
Got it.
And so there's a lot of research. So education, there's a lot of classes available through the library. If you're a business owner, there are companies like Grow Ketchikan, that is a nonprofit in town that can help you. Getting involved with your local Chamber of Commerce, where, of course, I'm the president, so I'm biased. But there's a lot of good opportunity for businesses there to get connected with other business owners that can help them out, too. So there's a lot of local resources to help.
And I think education is a very important topic when talking about financial wellness because, education itself can play a role in your financial success, I believe. I always have this mentality of the more you know, the more you're worth. If somebody asked me to do something while I was on a job, whether I was an administrative assistant or I was a manager, it didn't matter. I rolled up my sleeves and I did it. What do you think about the importance of education?
Man, education is huge. So I graduated from here in 2005.
Okay.
And I came back in 2017 because I finally convinced my wife she wanted to be an Alaskan.
Okay.
And
Good.
she was like, range, Shmaine, we'll come back. It was great. So we're back. But one of the things that is unique about Ketchikan is it's a beautiful, rich culture. The local life is fantastic. We're also an island, and so we tend to have an island mentality. And so there's a lot of, this is how it's always been, this is how it's always going to be. But the people who are finding a lot of success in Ketchikan are the ones who are innovating.
Okay.
The ones who are doing things in ways that you may not expect, the ones who have customer service skills that they're developing and online skills that they're developing, and a lot of different ways in approaching clientele. So with that, we've talked about education, knowing just how to grow, knowing, looking for opportunities to educate yourself in avenues that you don't understand can afford a lot of opportunity, even if it's not related to your field. I study sometimes things that I'm like, there's no way I'm going to take anything from this. And then they'll say one thing, and I'm like, I had no idea that that was going to be a thing that I needed, you know? I think that the local library is a great resource for that.
Great.
Hitting up, they have a ton of different things. I think we were talking about, they have, I'm just hawking them out. They have this app called Libby.
Yeah, oh, I love
That
Libby.
if you are a audiobook listener, you can get access to the whole state library. And so you have a ton of things in business, in finances, in budgeting. Once again, you're going to want to vet your resources. But it's incredibly helpful.
Okay, so arm yourself
Yeah.
with education about things that you might not know about so that your earning potential can
Yeah.
go up. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
The more that you can do and the more you can do effectively, the more valuable you're going to be to your
Right.
employer or as an employer. Those two things are kind of tied together.
And what do you think about the topic of resilience? Like when I think of Southeast Alaska, I think about resilience and how the people who live here are very resilient. How does that play into one's financial world as well?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I don't think you can be Southeast Alaskan without being somewhat resilient.
Right?
What is it? 160 inches of rain on average?
At
right?
least.
I mean, you gotta be okay with being waterlogged all the time. So resilience is just bred into our culture, and so knowing your strategy, developing a strategy. So we talk
Okay.
about you sit down and you actually put the things on paper.
That can be
Okay.
scary for some people.
Yeah, but if you don't do that, you can't make a plan.
That's true.
And then if you make a plan and then you never reference it, now you played sports growing up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you played on team sports. If you put a game plan together and then you don't go execute, the coach is going to chew you up at halftime
Sure.
because you have a game plan and you're not executing.
Okay.
Now, there are times where you execute the game plan flawlessly and it doesn't work, and what do? You modify the game plan.
Sure.
But not having a plan is going to ultimately lead to failure.
Okay, so people need to come up with a plan for themselves. And what are some of the best ways they can come up with a plan?
Well, once again, the local resources we mentioned, working with, and when we're talking about financially, working with if you're talking about tax situations, working with your CPA.
Okay, so don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, don't be afraid to, here's the deal. I don't do my own taxes, not because I can't, but because my brother's a CPA and he does a better job than I do anyways. And I was like, now ultimately I could do it, but he knows all these ins and outs and he sees things that I don't see.
Right.
And so when I go to, if you think about like working out at like your muscles, a lot of people bring on trainers. They don't bring on trainers because they're incapable of lifting weights.
Yeah.
That's not why you bring on a trainer. You bring on a trainer to push you to the next level.
Okay.
In other words, to keep you on track, to make sure that you're actually vested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen, life, as you know, has a way of punching you.
It does.
And keeping you down. And you need somebody who's going to come alongside you, pick you up, and help you take the next step.
And I think a plan is really important, especially when you're talking about finances, to set it ahead of time and say, you know what, okay, I'm going to check in where I'm at on my finances every 3 months.
Yeah.
Once a month, maybe you don't need to sit down and go through every single transaction and, analyze it, but come up with a plan, look at it every 3 months, every 6 months, once a year. What did I spend my money? Where is it going?
Yeah.
And I think just like understanding where it can go can give one empowerment in a
Sure.
financial conversation, and it can relieve a lot of stress. Okay, yes, you're in debt.
Yeah.
A lot of Americans are in debt.
Yeah.
It's okay. Take a look at it, and you can't make a game plan until you know where you're at.
Exactly.
And then check in on it. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, it's absolutely what we're talking about. And there's the rule of working with people, we talk about 80-20, right?
Yep.
You front load 80% of your work and then you sustain by 20%. It's the same with making your plan.
Okay.
Right? You're going to, you said, check in every 3 to 6 months. You may, the first month, check in every week.
Yeah.
because you're learning your habits. You're learning where are these expenses coming. If you're still checking every week after a couple of years, yeah,
I mean, some people might feel more comfortable. Everybody's got
Yeah.
a different comfortability, right?
but it also might lead to burnout.
That's true.
Yeah, and you then overanalyze and forget to live. Yeah.
So you had mentioned before that people need to understand, they need to know their why, of why are they saving money, why are they taking on their finances.
Yeah.
Can you speak to me a little bit about that and why that's important?
So in philosophy and in business practice, there's a lot of concept of you're going to live from the core of who you are. And if the core of who you are is aimed a certain way and you're trying to live contrary to it, you're always going to be at conflict with yourself. So the things that are important to me are not going to be the same things that are important to you. And you have to know those things. We talked about this as a good example. I have a friend, a really good friend of mine, who is really passionate about music, just a phenomenal musician. It's just fantastic. It's really hard to make money as a musician. It's really hard. Everybody wants to quote, so-and-so made it big and this person won American Idol. Well, that's great. That happens to 1 out of every 100,000 people. The rest of the very qualified musicians never make it off their couch or out of the coffee shop.
And it doesn't mean they can't be a musician,
Exactly.
right? But when it comes to your finances,
So then you have to say, okay, this is important to me. This is a passion. This is core to my being. Now, how do I structure everything else around this to make sure I can pursue my passion? I know I'm not going to make money from playing music. So how do I make sure that there's money coming in that I can take care of my family, I can take care of my kids, I can contribute to my community, and I can also pursue my passion? And so you have to be able to structure those things together. I'm all for people betting on themselves. I'm just not all for people betting on themselves with like no backup plan.
yeah, I agree with you. I remember I changed my career. I went from finance and I went into media, and that was a huge gamble. And people said I was crazy.
Was your mom one of those? No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, absolutely. My parents were like, are you sure you're really
Yeah.
making the right decision? And I decided to take a gamble on myself. But you don't do that without a backup plan.
Correct.
And so, of course, nobody would hire me in in the media industry when I first started because I had no experience. So what did I do? I dog walked. I dog walked to pay the rent, and I would walk dogs during the day, and then in the evenings I would go and intern for free at a production company
Right.
until I built up enough experience to be able to transition into a full-time job.
Right.
And so I think what you're saying is go for the passion
Yeah.
project, do what makes you happy, but have a backup plan for a baseline of livability.
Exactly. Well, and you know as well as I do that sometimes your passion and income are going to line up.
Yeah.
They're going to line up, and that is, I mean, that's the ticket right there.
But you got to work towards it.
But
right?
then, we were talking about resilience, and one of the things with resilience is being able to understand that everything worth having is going to cost.
Okay.
Like everything that's really worth something, it's going to be time, energy, ability, money. Maybe it's going to cost you time in education, in growing. Everything worth having costs something. I've been married close to 12 years, and I have put more energy into that. And it is worth every single bit that I've put in.
Okay, so decide the things that you want to invest in,
Yeah.
not even just monetarily speaking, but energy-wise and in your life.
Yeah.
And then you can build your finances around that.
Right.
Okay, great.
Because what we've talked about is that there's going to be things that are more, that appeal to people. They connect with them more. They bring them life. Your family, raising kids, that might be something that brings you life. And so you have to plan that.
Kids cost money.
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. My family was just gone for 3 weeks visiting my in-laws and spending some time. And the grocery bill was significantly different when I was eating by myself than when these little boys, like 3 and 1, they're just chowing down. Man, it was, I tell you. I don't know where they put it all, but actually I do because they're growing super fast.
Sure.
But it's expensive.
So that probably changed how you approached your own finances, knowing that you didn't have to buy food that week for the kids, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's finding out your why. Even in my job today, everything is oriented around, yes, I need to take care of my family. Yes, I want to take care of my clients. Yes, I want to take care of my community. But my first responsibility as a person is to my wife and to my kids.
Okay.
And so if I ever get those out of whack,
Yeah.
I'm going to have trouble. Like I'm going to struggle against my core identity because that's who I am at my core.
Okay. So
know?
people kind of have to know themselves,
Yes.
right, in order to know what's going to bring them a sense of wellness.
Yeah.
So for me, I enjoy travel.
Yeah.
I enjoy investing in my community, being
Yep.
able to go to the local businesses and being able to afford to go to them.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy, investing my money. I have a dog. I enjoy bringing her, So it's like everybody has different interests and different passions, different things that are their baseline in their life. And to be able to afford those things,
Yeah.
you have to be honest with yourself and where your money's going, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, there is a saying from a guy, and I'm not going to quote him directly, but sometimes you have to give up the good things to pursue the best.
Okay.
You know, and there's a lot of good things that we get invited into, and they're worthwhile things.
Yeah.
And so saying no to it doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. It means that you have to say yes to the best.
Yeah. I think about how easy it is to get sucked into monthly subscriptions of things. And I think those monthly subscriptions can really eat away at your bank account. And so I want to have the makeup kit being
Yeah.
brought to my house once a month. I want the fancy shampoos. I want the dog treats. I want, the online subscription to
Right.
the television streaming and all of that. But the next thing you know, all your finances your money's gone.
Yeah.
And it all went to this automatic subscription revenue. And you wonder, well, gee, should I have just not signed up for those things? And then
Right.
I would have had more money to go to the New York Cafe and have their delicious brunch on the weekend or something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and
Okay.
it's and the thing is, people think that they have to give something up, and I was like, no, you actually need to focus it in more.
Okay.
So for example, you were talking about New York Cafe. My wife loves New York Cafe.
Don't we all?
I do too. They their brunch is the best. Like I love going there for brunch.
Yeah.
Well, I won't get into too detailed, but it's delicious. And,
It's fantastic.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic. I am a brunch person. Sorry, it's
Okay.
like if you serve breakfast in town, you've probably
I hit a
seen me.
trigger word, yeah.
Brunch was just like yep. So my wife and I, we love brunch. I was like, the problem is you can't go to brunch every day.
Right.
I was like, so we actually have times that we schedule in, and we know what we're going to spend, and we go to brunch, and we enjoy our time together. It's factored in. It's something that we know about ourselves that we enjoy together. And so it feeds not only like the brunch side of me, but it also feeds the relationship side of my wife and myself,
Okay.
you know?
All right, so now I'm going to do like a quick round with you
Okay.
on 4 tips that people can apply to their wallet.
Excellent.
Okay, so what would be one tip that you suggest?
So one of the first things that we would talk about is having an emergency fund, a legitimate emergency fund. Because you never know what's going to happen in life. Like, I don't know, global pandemic might come up in
Right.
2020, right? And you suddenly, these streams of revenue, think about what affected Ketchikan. Like the tourism industry shut down for 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it hit everybody. If you have money set aside to prepare for that, now it's great that there were grants and there was ability to get out there, but you also, when you have something for yourself, it gives you this extra layer of security to buy you time to make decisions.
Okay, so it's very important to have an emergency fund.
Yeah.
What is an amount that you would recommend someone?
The first thing you got to start with a month. Like that's
Okay.
honestly a month's worth of expenses. That's where you got to start.
Okay.
Sometimes people are like, "Oh, I got to get 6 months," and that's true. You should probably get 6 months.
Okay.
But you're not going to be able to start with 6 months. Start with a month. Start saving money on a consistent basis until you get to the point where you have about 6 months.
Okay.
I'm also okay, depending on the nature of your job, to go as far as a year.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. But people don't need to start with that.
They don't need to start with
They
that.
just work towards the month.
Work towards a month.
Maybe you take a small amount, maybe let's say, 6% of your paycheck, 10% of your paycheck, and have
exactly.
it automatically deposited into somewhere maybe online that you can't easily go to the ATM and take the money out, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
As you can tell, I'm not a runner. But if I was a runner and I was prepping for a marathon, I wouldn't start by running 24 miles a day.
Okay. You
Yeah,
got to
I would
work your way up
start-
to it, right?
I would start by walking a mile a day because I would have to get myself in some sort of shape to run.
Got it. So financial fitness.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it.
Financial fitness, exactly.
All right. So what's your next tip?
The next thing that we might talk about is, this is a hot button issue in the news right now, is inflation.
Yeah.
So one of the hard things is right now, interest rates are low,
Okay.
inflation is high,
Yep.
cash is becoming worth less
Yeah.
every year because inflation is cutting into that. So if you think inflation, for example, last year, if it went at 7%,
Yeah.
so your dollar is worth 7% less the next year. And I think we all feel that, especially when we try to fill up our gas tank.
Well, I definitely noticed when I paid $12 for a bunch of grapes recently.
Right,
I was like,
exactly.
wow, didn't see that one coming.
Exactly, and it's while it is a transitory because we're dealing with global pandemic, inflation is a real thing even in the most passive of years.
And inflation happens
Yeah.
over time. It can be controlled to a certain extent, but it's something that we need to be aware of.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like even if you take over the last 30 years, you're going to have inflation between 2.2, 2.8%.
Right.
Right. It's going to happen, and the problem with cash is it's not going to keep up that value. Now, your banks, your financial people, they're all going to have solutions depending on your level of risk. But anything you can accumulate that cuts into what inflation is doing, and people say, well, what if I only get a 1% return? Well, cutting 1% in is significantly better than zero.
That's right.
Now, ideally, you'd want to outpace inflation, but sitting on too much cash has the same problem as not having cash at all.
Right? It's a risk.
It's a risk.
Either way, it's a high risk
Yes.
to have too much cash or not enough cash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The interest inflation is a guaranteed risk. It will happen, and
Yeah.
it has happened.
I remember, when I was working in finance, you would talk to people and say, well, what's your risk tolerance? And they'd
Yeah.
say, well, I don't want to take too much risk.
Yeah.
I don't want, I'm just going to sit on cash. And
Yeah.
you're like, well, that's a very risky decision.
Correct.
To have too much cash.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah. And so you need to balance those things. You need to have a real conversation and a real plan and realistic expectations. That's where I would suggest sitting down with a financial professional of some sort.
Okay.
To have that conversation.
So when you're to the point where you're starting to have, you don't want to have too much cash saved up, if you aren't sure what to do with the cash,
Yeah.
you turn to a finaal professional.
Yeah. Just have a
Okay.
conversation with somebody. And it's going to be the same thing with the literature. You need to vet who you're working with.
Okay.
Have they been in the industry? What's their record of success? Do they have any clients you can talk to?
Right.
That you can understand what it's like to work with that person.
Yeah.
Those are all good questions
And
to
do
ask.
you understand when the person is talking to you? Do you feel comfortable giving them your money? And
Right.
do you understand everything that they're saying? If it sounds like they're speaking in another language and they're not really breaking it down for you, maybe that's not the person for you,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So another thing you're saying, things to consider. In a small community like Ketchikan, we are very familiar with this, is the effects of long-term care.
Yes.
Statistics tell us something like 72% of people over 65 are going to go into long-term care.
Okay.
Now, we have a great facility where they do fantastic work here at the Pioneer Home, but they would also tell you they are not a legitimate full-time long-term care in the medical capacity. You have to get that at the hospital.
Okay.
Now, there are facilities like that down south. The cost of that is extremely high.
So people need to think about their own future and
Correct.
plan ahead.
Now, you can't plan for everything, but you can have a plan for everything.
That's true.
Does that make sense? Life is just different sometimes, and it'll hit you. But not talking about it is not going to help you.
Okay.
So
So we are all going to age, right?
Yeah.
There is no way to avoid that in life.
I mean, I plan on living forever, but we'll
I'm
see.
sure you
We'll see.
will. I'm sure you will. But the rest of us, we need to plan for the future.
I've been eating a lot of salt throughout my life to preserve my body.
Okay, so you're cured and ready to go.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's true. You want to invest in the hottest stock
Yeah.
on the market, but it's like really you shouldn't
Yeah.
even be thinking about that
Yeah.
unless you have already thought out, do I have health insurance, life insurance? Do I have a plan for long-term care?
Exactly.
At least that's my opinion.
Knowing where the potential pitfalls are.
Okay.
One of the analogies that I talk about with any type of insurance or health, life, whatever it is, when you drive a car, you put a spare tire in the back. You don't plan on popping your tire.
Right.
That's not why you get a spare. You get a spare so that when you get on the side of the road, you're not trying to find that stupid little donut and put it on your car and drive tilted the entire way.
Sure.
Or if you don't even have a donut, you need some sort. A donut at least will get you somewhere.
You need to have some
Yeah.
sort of plan in place. Or
Otherwise,
tool.
you're just on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is number 4? Tip
Uh,
for your wallet.
So one of the things so we talked about inflation. One of the things that people do throughout their life is as their income goes up, they inflate their living expenses.
Okay.
Understanding your baseline of livability is a very big deal.
So what does that mean?
So what are the basics that you have to do? And those are the basics like, you have to pay rent. I don't care what your landlord tells you, you're going to have to pay rent. You're going to have to pay KPU for electricity and, and fuel and what. Well, I guess you guys don't do fuel, but.
KPU is very grateful for that.
Yeah.
Feel free to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, we don't want to deal with fuel. Yeah. You're going to have to pay for food.
Okay.
There are things that are going to be happening in your life. But
Food, electricity, a roof over your head.
Yeah.
So like you're talking about the basics.
The basics.
Okay.
What do I need to be able to live? And and we're not saying like survive. We're talking about live.
Yep.
Okay. Because then you can have a conversation about if you're trying to pay off debt. Well, maybe you don't need the $1,000 phone that costs $200 a month.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you can buy the $500 phone that costs $100 a month because that actually fits who you are better. You're actually able to sustain this and actually pay off things. So in the future, the $1,000 phone is not a big deal.
So make sure your basics are covered and that you have a plan in place to be able to cover them before you start expanding on your living.
Yeah, exactly.
And start bringing in other things.
Exactly.
Okay.
And one of the things that can happen is you fill up your life with so many things that are wants that suddenly you can't pay for your needs.
Right. Understanding the difference between what is a want and what is a need.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today,
You're
Ben.
welcome.
This was super helpful. I feel more empowered discussing finances.
Yeah, there you go.
I can't wait to go home and take a look and see what I can shuffle around and trim the fat in my own financial life. And I think people just need to understand that financial wellness is possible. It's possible to feel empowered and not feel like this is a stressful topic and have some peace surrounding it by just implementing some of the helpful tips that you shared with us today. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me.